Hi guys, welcome to part 4 of Adobe Illustrator. First thing I want to look at today is the type tool and the type functionality within Illustrator. I would recommend for major typography always using InDesign, but for things like headings, maybe if you want to do like a really fancy heading and use some of the functionality within Illustrator, can do type, but certainly don't do any type layout within Illustrator. So obviously to get type within Illustrator, we use our type tool over here on our toolbar. Grab your type tool. You can either click and just start typing away. You guys get the idea. Or you can click and drag a text box and type away within that box. And I've pressed caps lock, very good. Right, and so you can see I'm now typing within a text box. So once we have some type, and I'm going to write, hello, I am type, yay. Right, once we have some type, I'm just going to make that a little bit larger so we can see it. Beautiful. Once we have type, you can see up the top here, you can change the character, the font family, so italics, regulars, bold, things like that, the font size or the point size. You've got a few paragraph options. If you want more options available in terms of type, you can go to Window and go to Type and bring up things like your character palette and stuff like that, which will allow you to change the leading, the kerning, tracking, all of that stuff, which I'll cover off more in InDesign. But if you're aware of type, that's where you can change all of that stuff. Otherwise, here you can pick your font family that you want to use. I'm going to pick Century Gothic because it's kind of nice but way too big. And so yeah, you can pick your font family, and then over here you can pick your italics, your bold, and whatever else sits within that particular font family. And then obviously in terms of size, you can pick exact sizes here with your point. I can say I want it 30 point, or you can simply increase the size by dragging it out. But when you do that, guys, make sure you always hold down Shift to constrain proportions. We never want to stretch or squash type because that's just awful, and that'll make Andrew very, very sad. So make sure you're always constraining proportions if you're manually increasing the size of type. So sitting within our type tool, some of the other things we have is type area tool, type on a path, vertical type, things like that. So obviously, type tool is what I just showed you. Type area tool allows you to convert a shape into a type area or a text box. So if I now go up to and grab my type area tool, I can click on this shape, and I've now turned that rectangle into a text box. You can do it with any shape that you create. If I create some really random thing like this, right? Beautiful. I can convert that into a type area by clicking on it, and off we go. And I can now type inside that. Not really sure why you'd want to do that, but if you ever do, there you go. Keep in mind when you do that, guys, that anything you have applied to the shape in terms of a stroke color, a fill color, will be taken away when you convert it to a type shape. So if you did want color in behind it, you would have to copy the shape, paste it in front, convert that shape into a type area. We also have the type on a path tool. So if I have a path like this, right, let's just make ourselves a little path. Actually, that's an awful path, Andrew. Let's make something a little bit with some nicer curves. All right, lovely. There's a lovely roller coaster. If I click on this path with my type, I can now type along a path. Right? Good for making children's storybooks. This is still just type. You can treat it as type. You can increase the size. You can change the character style, all of that kind of things. You'll notice that when we create type on a path, there's these little lines. When I select it, see there's like a blue line here and a blue line at the end. And when I hover over them, little arrows come up. What that allows you to do is actually push the type along the path, so you can decide where you want it to sit along the path. There are other options, things like you can pick how the type sits along the path. They live up here within your type on a path, and type on a path options. So things like, obviously we can flip it where it is aligned. So at the moment it's aligning to the baseline of the text. You can have it sitting center, or the ascender or descender, which is in typography, the ascender is the part that sits above the X height. So things like the top part of the T. Descender are things which hang below, so like the bottom part of the G, the P, the Y. I'm trying to keep it nice and simple for you guys without going into too much typography stuff, because I will cover that in InDesign. So we'll leave it on baseline for now. Effect, most of these are pretty awful. I wouldn't recommend using them, but they're things like you can make it like a 3D ribbon. So Illustrator tries to, rather than the type just sitting flat along the path, it pretends that it's like a 3D path. And look, a lot of this stuff just ends up looking like horrible word art, so I wouldn't recommend it. Stair step, rather than have the type smoothly along the path, it keeps the letters perpendicular to the page and it just staggers them along the path. Where this stuff is useful is maybe, let's say you were doing like a logo and we wanted to add some, this is my awesome logo, right? You know, I want this text, but I want it to sit on the inside of my circle. I'm going to have, like, you know, some sort of graphic above it, I don't know. So that's how you would do it. You go up to your type, you go to your type on a path options. You can either flip it. Helps if you turn preview on, Andrew. You can flip it. And from here, we could now go in and we could move the text around like so, right? Yay. And there we go. So that's where you would use your type on a path. The second thing I want to cover off, and look, it's very difficult to do it quickly, but a lot of this stuff is all just about giving you guys just, you know, base level functionality, so you feel like you can go into the program and know how things work, and then if you want to explore them further, you can. Just looking at brushes, there's 5 different types of brushes within Illustrator. You can make all of them yourself. There's a whole lot of preset ones, not just these default ones which sit here within your brush palette. If you go up to the top to your little drop down menu, you can open brush libraries, and there's a whole bunch of preset brushes things here. I'll show you some of them now. But in terms of brushes, they can pretty much be applied to anything. So you have got a paintbrush tool. I'm just going to grab this charcoal brush here. So with your paintbrush tool, you can sort of freehand paint, and if you're using a Wacom tablet, it's nice and easy. You can, because it's all vector, right, we can increase the size of things. Starts to look pretty awful. But you won't lose quality in doing so. If you don't like that brush, you can go, oh no, I want to use, I've still got my brush from before, right? There it is. Oh, it looks awful because I squashed it up too much. But you can also apply brushes to shapes that you make. So if I make a square and we go here and select that charcoaly brush, right, I can apply it to a shape. I can even apply it to things that I create with the pen tool. If I create some sort of interesting shape like this, right, rather than having the standard stroke, I can apply that brush as a stroke. So a whole bunch of different options. Like I said before, there's a lot of preset brushes. If we open up, let's go to artistic and let's have a look at watercolor, for example, right? So what we've now done is we've opened up the watercolor brushes, and again, there's a whole lot of preset things. I can grab my paintbrush tool. I can say, yep, I like this and I want to paint with that. Ta-da, beautiful. Now you can see that it's all gray at the moment. That's because I'm painting with black. If I change the color to be green, right? It's going to change it to green, so on and so forth. So they're not set colors. You can change the color you want to use. You can still increase or decrease the size, guys, but keep in mind the more you do it, it'll start to look pretty ordinary. But they're all vector. Size doesn't matter. You're not going to lose quality. You can change the color of them. Artistic brushes are pretty much like they say. They're things like watercolor, charcoals, you know, that kind of inks, paint brushes, that kind of stuff. There's also a lot of calligraphic brushes. I always feel like I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable with that. But so again, there's a few preset calligraphic brushes, or you can open others, or you can make your own. But again, looking at trying to recreate that sort of calligraphy look within Illustrator. I'll make it a bit larger so we can see. Right, I'll grab this one, we'll grab our paintbrush, and we'll go, yay, ta-da, wee. Right, so, you know, I guess what I'm trying to encourage is you guys to have a bit of a look, have a bit of a play around with the types of brushes. You can't really break anything. If you edit a brush and make changes to it, Illustrator's going to give you a warning and say, oh, you're changing a brush, are you sure you want to do that? And you can either say yes, or you can say no. You can edit any of these brushes by clicking on them and going up to, where does it live here? I always just double click on them. Maybe you can't now. Maybe you need to duplicate it and double click. But if you double click on any of the brushes, it's going to bring up the brush options for that particular type of brush. They are different for the types of brushes. So this is for an art brush. If I double click on a calligraphy brush, you can see it's very different. If I go down to what's called a pattern brush, again, very different, but that looks at similar to a pattern, so you can set tiles for your sides and your corners and things. I know it all looks a little bit overwhelming, but it's probably not, in terms of pattern brushes and art brushes, things that you'll be using that often. But just if you want to have a bit of a play around with the brushes, have a look at the preset things here, because some of them are awful, some of them are really good, and some of them you might find useful. If you want to play around with making your own brushes, please be my guest and have some fun with it. I think that's it for this one. So, looked at type tools. Oh, I completely forgot with the type tools. Let's go back. This is nice. This is good. And it'll only be very quick. The three things I showed you, so the type tool, the type area, type and path, you can do all of those three things in a vertical sense. I don't know why you would ever want to use vertical type. I could not encourage you less to use vertical type, but if you need it for some reason, then that's here. If you don't know what I'm talking about with vertical type, this is what I'm talking about. This is vertical type, and it's a nightmare to read, guys, because it's vertical type. But anyway, yeah, so all of those options, the same thing. You can do this on a path, you can do this within a shape. That's what these things are here. Don't worry too much about the touch type tool. New thing to Illustrator, a bit more complex. Don't want to bore you guys. So I think that's it for lesson 4. I will say farewell. I will see you again on the next one. Enjoy, play around with all this stuff, guys. The best way to learn how to use the programs after you watch these things that I'm showing you is just to open it up and play around and see how it works. You can't really break anything. So enjoy. Thanks, guys. Bye.